Hello, hello. Testing myself. Hi, everyone. This is Christian Blaney from Christian Blaney's Cockpit. This is a talk radio show on PIR. Sorry, there wasn't any good fade into it. Things are weird. So I'll be back at you again this coming Friday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. But for right now, my normal show time is also Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And today, I'm joined by my professor, Douglas Cameron.
Cameron Douglas.
Cameron Douglas. Thank you.
Great to be with you, Christian.
So,
you would not be the first to make that mistake.
Yeah, it's two first names. How's living life like that?
It's fun. When I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later, but
Sure.
when I worked for a couple of different government agencies over the last few years, and you would not believe the number of times I had to hassle IT to get my email address name in the right order.
Your first name as your first name?
Yep.
Man. Well, I'm having him on because he's one of my history professors, and history professors are always fun to talk to.
We like to think so.
I had Peter on one of my past shows, and it was it was pretty much plateauing, and then it just spiked up with Peter. And I was like, oh, I should have way more people like this on. So I'm glad that I can have you on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Also, you have a background in I guess it's a crude way to say it, but you have a background in nukes, which is kind of cool.
I do. The short version of my background is I graduated from Prin a few years back, went to grad school for international studies at the University of Denver. From there, went into a fellowship with the National Nuclear Security Administration, which is part of the Department of Energy and does a lot of the sort of science-based elements of nuclear weapons. When the fellowship ended, got a job with a contractor working for the Department of Defense also in the nuclear weapons space. And with partially the pandemic and partially other things going on in my life, was the bureaucracy was not for me long term. It's it takes a certain kind of personality to be successful working in a bureaucratic environment, which is not me. So,
what are those qualities? Because is that an inherently bad thing?
No, it's not an inherently bad thing at all. It's a lot of. I think the primary thing is a willingness and an ability to sort of work on something that you're not going to see the payoff of ever. I mean, and it's the nuclear business is kind of unique in that sense, and a little weird in that you're working on things. You hope your work is useless, right?
Yeah.
You hope that the weapons you're designing or developing don't ever get used.
Sure.
And even in the best case scenario, if you're working on, say, the budget for a new missile system, it's like, well, this may come online in sometime in the late 2030s, and so it's a much
slow.
It's slow. It's ponderous. There's a lot of some people do very well at kind of navigating the red tape and the bureaucratic little gamesmanship that goes on as programs compete for funding and things like that. But that was not something I excelled at or enjoyed. So
Gotcha. You just don't want to have to play games to interact with people, or is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, that is.
I feel the same way
it,
all the time. Yeah, it's like, no, dude, if you just would have said to your professor this, you would have gotten a full grade. And it's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Well, cool. That's actually probably the best introduction that could have happened there. Yeah. You also said you spent some time at PIR really quick.
I did.
What's the deal with that? Yeah.
Once upon a very long time ago, I hosted. I had my own kind of political talk show. I got out of the politics game while I was still a Prince student, but did that for a number of years. Had a lot of fun with it. I also, the political science department had me host. Or co-host some of PIR's election night coverage, and so I was on the mic for election nights of 2012 and 2014.
Oh, nice, cool. So you're Chris Strong is actually the student that's doing a similar thing to what you did. Do you know him?
I do not.
Yeah, you should meet him. He's a cool guy. He's a friend of mine.
There are a lot of students that I have not met.
Yeah. It's funny that you said you got out of the politics game and then went right back in, or
well, I'd say there's a big difference between being in the political world and being in government.
Okay.
At the levels of government I was working at after grad school, you're far enough down the food chain that the person in the White House has basically no bearing on your life or your job. There may be sort of like big picture directional things, but like the nuts and bolts of what I would be doing every day was no different under the Trump administration than it would have been now under the Biden administration or had been under the Obama administration before.
Gotcha. Cool. So you, apart from going to Penn, went to University of Denver for your master's?
Yes.
Right? And
yes.
Why University of Denver? Because I love Colorado. I've just only been there for summer camp.
Yeah. Denver has one of the best international studies, international relations programs in the country, and it is not in DC. And those were kind of the two big selling points for me. Was, I also had spent a lot of time at summer camp out in Colorado, and really had the bug to be out there a little more. And in addition to that, I looking at it at that point, thinking I was still going to have a long career in the bureaucracy, is like, well, I've got my entire life to live in DC. Let's take advantage of the opportunity to be somewhere else.
Sure.
So it came down to GW in Washington, and then Denver and Syracuse. And if you're choosing just enjoyment of life factors between Denver and Syracuse, it's not particularly close.
Yeah, I understand. That makes sense. Well, cool. So really quick, I just I sent you over a quick sheet, an email sheet, just like, hey, some things that we can talk about. Since we don't actually know each other that well. We're just in a very small class together, so it's a friendly environment. But obviously haven't been with you as long as I've been with Peter and stuff like that. This is your first year being a professor at the college. So actually, first off, how is being a professor at the college for your first time around, I guess? I'm
really enjoying it. It is. There are things that are challenging that I kind of didn't expect. I sort of had this. You kind of think of lecturing and just sort of talk, just getting paid to talk about history, which is honestly just ideal for me. With my particular sort of nerdy inclinations on that front, but running class discussions is harder than you would think. Just sort of, especially if you have a morning class and you're just sort of pulling teeth trying to get people to participate, and trying to find that balance of I like talking about history, but I also want to shut up and get out of the way so that other people can talk about history. Exactly. Other people can kind of explore, and it doesn't just become me sermonizing about things. It's been a really cool experience. I've had a lot of fun with it. I haven't had to do a whole lot of grading yet, so that I'm sure will be tricky to try and figure out. But we'll plow right off the side of that bridge when we get to it. Yeah. You want to get a math? I'm not as bad as I sometimes think I am, but it also was never one of my favorite things. Also, maybe compared to the circles that you've been in, you're probably not at the top of the game. I did spend a fair bit of my professional life being the only non-physics or engineering PhD in an office of like 15 people. Sure. Yeah. Boy, what classes are you teaching right now? Right now, I am teaching, your class is called The Global Atomic Age, which is a history of nuclear weapons. And I'm also teaching the U.S. in the 20th century and ancient Greece and Rome. Oh, cool. Is there, like, how do I put this? So for me, if I was to have to teach a class, I'd probably go for World War II. That's where I have the most, like, understanding of how history went. Maybe Cold War, it's possible. But what's, like, your favorite part of history to teach or to learn about? Either one. I guess it's interchangeable. I'm enjoying Greece and Rome a lot. I took that class myself when I was a student, and there's a lot of really cool things going on in that period. Probably the best way to answer this is my history capstone was on republics before the United States. And so that was kind of a mix of kind of medieval and early modern Europe. Looked at Venice, looked at the 17th century Dutch, and looked at the Russian city-state of Novgorod in the Middle Ages, and kind of a combination of history and political theory, sort of exploring their different institutions and the way that they set up their governments in non-monarchical, not quite representative, but certainly having power kind of divided among their nobilities, and having a sort of broader swath of their population having a say in the way that those cities and small countries were governed. So I really enjoy that kind of political theory and governance aspect of history, which is fun because it cuts across eras. You can talk just as easily about the Roman Republic or the Greek city-states. You can go through sort of medieval and Renaissance cities in Italy, and you can get all the way up into the modern period, though things start getting very, very different in that field after the French Revolution, which kind of changes the game in a lot of ways. So I have tended to be before that, but it's a sort of cross time period focus within history.
Interest, yeah. What's the deal with Venice? Because it's, from what I understand of it, I've never been there, very small. Mm-hmm. Why would it have so much influence over the rest of the world, and why would you study it, I guess, when it comes to republics?
Yeah, Venice is, with the exception of, I believe, Iceland, the longest-lasting republic in history. It, from its foundation in the 9th century through basically its conquest by Napoleon in the 1790s. It was just remarkably stable. It ran a fairly significant overseas empire after about the 1200s when...
Venice had an empire?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Venice controlled a fair number of cities along the kind of Adriatic coast of what's now Croatia, and a good chunk of Greece, which they ended up with after the Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople.
Rough.
Oops, we set out to conquer Egypt and accidentally sacked the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Oh no!
Wait, I didn't know about that. What?
Yeah.
Please inform me.
The Fourth Crusade.
I want to learn.
The Fourth Crusade. Oh man. Okay, so, the Fourth Crusade came about 10 years after the Third Crusade, which is probably the most famous one, where you have Richard the Lionheart and Philip II, King of France, and those guys, and a new pope had come in, and he kind of wanted to get in on the crusading game, so he recruited a group of...
Imagine that being a thing. I want to get on the game of making people kill other people for God.
Yeah, wild stuff in the Middle Ages.
They're bored.
But the new pope recruited a group of sort of less wealthy French nobles who contracted Venice to build them a fleet, but they expected a crusade like 3 times bigger than they actually got, so they ended up super deep in debt to Venice. Venice had to like stop their entire economy to build this fleet. And,
did they mess up the order, or like for ships? How did that happen?
They just part of it is they just overestimated.
Oh.
Another part of it is crusading armies weren't like modern armies where you have a clear chain of command and like orders to go here and do this. So if you are, if you're a crusader from, say, Marseille in the south of France, the main body of the crusade might be leaving from Venice to go to the original target of this crusade was Egypt. But if you're in Marseille, you might just say, oh, it's much easier and cheaper for me to just get a ship straight from Marseille to Egypt or to the Holy Land.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people did that too.
Okay.
So that kind of messed with their estimates of numbers. Anyway, the Doge of Venice was a really cool guy named Enrico Dandolo, who was like 95 years old and blind.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But he was like one of the shrewdest political operators of essentially all time. And he came up with this idea of, well, the Crusaders need to pay back their debts. We have a city on the Croatian coast called Zara, which is being a real pain in our butts. We'll take this crusading army and go take Zara. The Pope didn't like this because Zara was owned by the King of Hungary, so he excommunicated everybody. And then, they're excommunicate, and then the dispossessed heir to the Byzantine throne shows up, and he's like, well, if you guys come to Constantinople, the people will throw out the guy who murdered my father and took the throne, and they'll be able to pay you out of the vast treasuries of the Byzantine Empire. That turned out to be a wildly optimistic assessment of how the people of Constantinople thought about this dude. So essentially, with no other options, and after a whole lot of fairly typical Byzantine political intrigue, the Crusaders are finally just like, forget it, we're just going to take this place. So they looted Constantinople for like 4 days, set a fire that burned like 100,000 houses. It was pretty ugly. Yeah,
sure. That would make sense. Something that I notice like throughout history is that people, meaning humans in general, make really, really, really bad decisions when in like when in really important positions of power. But like you see things like that happen now, but there's a little more like news coverage about it maybe, and so there might be one side like, oh, this actually makes sense because of like this political theory or whatever. I wish I could go back in time and like ask anyone that was related with that, like, hey, why do you think that was a good idea at all? What's going on here? And it's like, hey, well, you don't understand the political like situation in Southeast Europe. We really have good relations with these guys, but over here, just over the hill, there's these people that make great milk, and we really need some of this milk. It gets super tangled up, and so I wonder how much of this we actually understand versus like how much we're just dogging on them.
It's tough because so much has been lost.
Yeah,
there are. We can stick with the Fourth Crusade example since we're on it, but your sources are essentially like 2 or 3 guys who were on the crusade took the time to write down sort of detailed accounts of what happened from their perspective. But you're getting it from the the sources themselves will admit to this, but the biased perspective of a servant of or a like mid-level bureaucrat who's serving one particular French lord, or a Byzantine guy who lived through the sack, so he's obviously got
he's probably got something to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's got some axes to grind.
Sure.
And the things that we have to kind of get insight into more modern political actions, like when we look at decision making in the nuclear class, for example, we have Harry Truman's diary that we can read and see what he was thinking on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
We just don't have that in a lot of these older cases. So a lot of that knowledge is has been lost, and it's just kind of down to speculation at this point.
Sure. Something that I always think about when it comes to lost knowledge of history, there's two things. One, obviously the like destruction of the Aztecs. That's really, really tough when we only have so much information. We have a couple of good books of information about it, but it's just tough how much has been lost there. And the second one is the burning of the Library of Alexandria.
Still not over it.
Kills me every time. Still not over it. What year did it happen? Do you know?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah. A long time ago, but there's a ton of experts that always say it set us back scientifically 1,000 years or something. Yeah. Man, we should not have kept our books all in one place. I wonder if there's anything similar now. Obviously it'd be very difficult, and I don't think it would ever work. But let's say the internet went down. I rely on or Y2K. If Y2K happened, I rely on almost all of my information on almost all of my information comes from the internet. Every skill that I need to learn is always there. If I needed tips on anything, it's always there. If I need to figure out how to get something, all that information is there. And if I didn't have that, I would be everyone would be just a much less advanced person. I think.
And not just that, but if you're some sort of future archaeologist or something trying to figure out our society, and you aren't able to sort of reverse engineer a device that accesses the internet,
it's gone.
There's basically nothing. I mean, since you may be lucky and find a print newspaper somewhere, but those are getting rarer and rarer, and so much of our not just knowledge of the world, but so much of our culture now is online. So if you're a future archaeologist trying to figure us out without us to ask, you may see just like, a tapering off in the 80s and 90s and then just a void.
Yeah, just like nothing happened after that. But in reality, like, we invented so much.
Yeah.
I always think about that when I think about the possibility of like advanced civilizations even before we understand, like, still human civilizations, but like I don't believe the entirety of what's in the book, but I think there's some very interesting things that Graham Hancock brings up. There's a book called Fingerprints of the Gods, and it's a book just about everything that Graham Hancock, who was a archaeologist, everything about. It's a compilation of all the evidence that shows that there was a more advanced human civilization before one, maybe in like Mesopotamia. Like something along those lines. And so there's a lot of evidence that he brings up about it. Like, by the time you finish the book, you're like, dang, how could we like not be believing this? But like, again, like in the book also, I've told this to my viewers a couple times, like there's a bunch of situations where he's like, there is not enough evidence to prove this is real, but this is something to consider because we have one piece of evidence.
Yeah.
And like one of those things is there is a like very detailed map of what is under the ice in Antarctica. And the last time that there was no ice there was like 10,000 years ago. And we have a map from there copied from somewhere, we're not sure where, but it was made by a Turkish general that got killed because his friends didn't like him very much. But
an occupational hazard of being a Turkish general.
It's true. He was like one of those, I think he was from like an Ottoman era, but yeah, tough stuff. So it's just really interesting to see how easy information can be lost like that. Like, we had, supposedly, we have a map of what's under Antarctica, like straight up. Like, if there's something that says it's Antarctica, but it matches up perfectly to this one piece of land. I don't know. What do you have to say?
That's one of the best things I think about history is that the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
It's both very exciting and very humbling in that way.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. What do you think our like landscape will look like after humans leave Earth? Do you think we will? Because I feel like we must, right?
That's a good question. Honestly, no idea. I will say if you or the viewers have watched The Expanse, I think that's a sort of near future sci-fi show on Amazon, is a very fascinating and well done sort of theory of that. It's, essentially you've got, kind of international politics as normal, but the players, instead of being countries on Earth, are Earth and Mars and the people kind of living out in the asteroid belt, which makes for some interesting political dynamics. There's they do really well in kind of making it sort of true to science on the show. So there's aspects of people who've grown up in the belt in very light gravity can't survive on Earth because their skeletons aren't built for full gravity and that kind of thing. So there's they do really really well with that. And then if you're looking for an interesting take on that, I don't really have one, but that's
I've actually been looking for a show, so that's something that I'll definitely check out. I do have Amazon.
Yeah.
I love to always check out all the concepts of science fiction even more than I like the shows. And just shows in general are awesome. Is The Expanse one of your favorite shows, or do you what's a list for you?
It is. Oh boy. Lately it's been a lot more like comedy kinds of things. Brooklyn Nine-Nine is always a favorite.
I still haven't watched that. I need to though. It's fun.
It's a lot of fun.
You've actually brought it up like twice in class before. I'm like, man, I
probably
really
have made a couple of references to that in class. Yeah. The Good Place is really well done.
Yeah, I have seen The Good Place. Yeah.
It has a lot of really really cool drawing on philosophy, a history adjacent field, which is also a good time.
Would it be considered part of the humanities? Is philosophy one of the humanities? Yeah.
Yeah. It would be. What else? Oh, talking about like potential past human civilizations in Antarctica brings back my binge watching of Stargate SG-1 a long time ago.
What's that?
It was a like late 90s, early 2000s, sort of corny but very very enjoyable sci-fi series.
That's like one of my favorite eras in sci-fi.
Yeah.
Just like right before we actually understand what's going on, but far
Yeah.
enough so that we have the technological ability to show what we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like Firefly?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I'm not like a rabid Firefly fan.
Yeah.
This is my native language, I promise. But yeah, I did enjoy that one quite a bit.
Yeah, I had a bunch of friends in cross country in like my early section of high school that were deeply into that like universe. They really loved it. And I never got around to it, mostly because back then I didn't really have any viewing services.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in like northwestern Maryland where there's no internet really. So
Yeah.
we had like Dish and we didn't have cable. We just had Dish actually. And so if it wasn't on there, I wasn't watching it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm taking this time now to like catch up and everything. I could have done it in high school, but I didn't have viewing services then. Just didn't make sense. But now I do.
Nice.
Got everything except HBO.
Yeah,
What do you have?
I
Do you have like a compilation of?
Oh gosh, I have Netflix. Had Disney Plus for a little bit just for The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I watched that. I just
which-
finished that the other day actually.
Spectacular.
Super good.
Love that.
But Gina Carrera,
yeah.
what's going on with that in your opinion?
It's
a tough one.
Yeah.
'Cause it's a freedom of speech deal, right? I was talking about it with Darren the other day.
Yeah,
and it's like it's a weird thing.
It is a weird thing, and I think it's something that the modern world is going to have to adjust to. Especially as you get people who are more our age getting into positions of higher leadership, because we grew up with social media. We grew up with kind of putting a lot of our innermost thoughts out there in a way that a lot of people before us didn't. So
is the solution to not do that? What do you think she should have done, or what should have happened, or how it should have been handled?
Oof.
Yeah.
I don't really have a strong take on what she should have done. I mean, it's her historical analogy wasn't great, but people have said a lot stupider things and not gotten fired for it.
Yeah, that was my thing. Like, it
Yeah.
wasn't fantastic, but like, it was also weird how Disney. For those of you that don't know, really quickly, Gina Carrera, who's an actress in The Mandalorian, a offset of Star Wars. She recently got fired from Disney because she had a post on her Instagram Live that pretty much, I think the best way to put it was compared the treatment of Jews during the Holocaust to conservatives in America today when it comes to, I think specifically like voicing their opinion or belief or pain, I guess.
For essentially, the connection was like being persecuted for a part of your identity.
Yes.
And it's,
there's some truth to that, which is weird. Like, I'm not a conservative. I actually walk the middle of the line, but like it's them actually firing her kind of did say something to me more than what she even said. It was like,
I would agree with that. I mean, I'm a big proponent of Godwin's law, which is the first person to reference Hitler in an argument automatically loses. Just because there are many things in the world, and very few of them are actually like Hitler.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and we see this in a lot of fields. There's a really fascinating story that's been unfolding over the last couple of weeks about a New York Times journalist, Donald McNeil, I believe his name is, and he went as sort of the like official New York Times expert on a trip to Peru with some high school students, and made some comments there that you'd think are fairly. I mean, he seems to have a somewhat abrasive style, but not particularly controversial. Like, one of the examples is some students asked about like blackface, and he said apparently there's a South African tradition where like black South Africans do essentially minstrel shows, and it's kind of they kind of enjoy that, and that's their culture, and if you as a white American go in there and try to tell them not to do that, they'll just kind of tell you to go jump in a lake. But apparently his sort of commentary was not taken too well by the high school students.
Gotcha.
And he was the lead science reporter and the lead pandemic reporter and for the New York Times, and had like been with him for 40 years, and they kind of unceremoniously shoved him towards the door.
Really?
Kind of over it. So.
Yeah, it bothers me when that kind of stuff happens, because it's essentially like getting rid of all the important parts of a person that you may have held onto them for like one thing that they did.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean?
And you know, life is richer and more interesting with weirdos in it. You know, even
it is. I love freaks.
Yeah, not to be calling anybody we've discussed a weirdo or a freak or anything.
There's some people that know they're weirdos.
Yeah,
Come on.
Yeah, but Alex Jones, for example, is absolutely nuts. But the video compilations of like Alex Jones losing his gourd are just hilarious.
Also, he has actually like revealed some pretty weird stuff for like every 100 shots, like maybe 2 are right, but still that's enough for me to to weed through those.
Stopped clock right twice a day and that.
Do you remember the Bohemian Grove thing?
I don't.
Yeah, it was one of the things that he revealed. I don't remember what year this might have been. It might have been the 90s. He wasn't a young man then, but he was younger than he is now. And pretty much like in California, there's this place called Bohemian Grove where a bunch of super, super rich people, like the elite, go around this flaming effigy of an owl god and chant and sacrifice this effigy of I think like a prostitute. And that all of actually not even I think I know that's what happened. And so like of course Alex Jones had always been this like figure that just would like say whatever. Oh, the reptile people, like, turn the frogs gay. But like that's what everyone knows him from. But actually like he has brought some pretty interesting stuff to light. Like he was talking about the Jeffrey Epstein stuff way before that stuff came around.
Yeah.
So I guess he's not totally something we shouldn't listen to, but he is, as you said, like absolutely more worth like for the majority of the population when it comes to like fun stuff to listen to.
And I mean, like there is a strain in our culture that is, we've lost a lot of the like live and let live ethos of like there's a Latin phrase that I'm forgetting, but it translates to matters of taste are not worth arguing about. And a lot of people get very up in arms about things that essentially boil down to matters of taste.
Yeah.
Most of politics, I think, is like that. Because I mean, you can get very heated about marginal tax rates, but like honestly, what's the difference in the end is very small.
Yeah, I mean the whole issue, the whole situation with that, like when it comes to humans, like don't worry about matters of taste. It is it's like, well, what if that person has a drastically different matter of taste than they?
Yeah,
and that's where it gets ugly.
Yeah, and the other challenge is when, and this is part of why I ran screaming in the other direction from politics at a fairly young age.
Sure,
was when this becomes your God substitute. It takes on an almost religious element of, they're not just people who disagree with you, they're apostates. Because there is
winning and losing when it like in pretty much every part of the world now. Like even posting on social media, there's a winning and losing of that. If you don't get enough likes, you're losing to yourself. I mean, I might have just sounded like a boomer. That's how I like see. I've been on social media for a while, but that's just how I see the situation. I mean, I want there to be less winning and losing. Like in our court system, there has to be a winner and a loser, and in political situations, there has to be a winner and a loser, and those two things pretty much dictate the rest of the way like society goes. Yeah. If you're I mean, obviously there's some counterculture ways, like obviously the state is going in the direction of legalizing marijuana, right? That seems to be the direction things are going, even though it's legal right now. So there's some ways to turn it on its head, but it's rare that kind of stuff happens where you backwards engineer something.
Yeah.
Like you take something that's illegal and make it legal, and then change society in the direction of being for like either a substance or a belief or something like that.
Yeah, and there's a lot too of trying. I think marijuana is a good example of this.
Yeah.
Is it's been a generational shift, and it's taken a while.
And also, I should probably not call it marijuana. Let me call it cannabis, because marijuana is rooted in racism.
Sure.
Yeah.
But with I'll just call it weed for
Weed,
simplicity's
yeah,
sake.
weed's fine.
With weed legalization, it's taken a very long time and a lot of sort of slowly evolving perspectives from people to sort of change that. And there is a lot of people who are trying to speed that process up, make it happen in a really big hurry. I think
that's where winning and losing comes in.
Yeah, and the legalization of same-sex marriage, I think, because that cultural shift happened relatively quickly, I think has given a lot of people sort of a skewed perspective of
how fast
this can happen and how easy it is to really not just change 50% plus one, but really develop a new consensus around issues.
Yeah, I agree. I think I talked about that on one of my other radio shows with Dean Colarossi, who's
Dean.
Yeah, who's the president of Turning Point here at the college. He's a cool guy. He's in my house.
Yeah.
Go watch that episode if you want. I think it's number 4.
Nice.
But
Dean's a good friend of mine. We work in the AU rafting program together.
Oh, look at that. Well, you guys have both been on the radio show. That's awesome. Yeah, but we talked about something like that. Like there's some things that from what I have come to understand, there's actually not that much difference like in general values between conservatives and liberals, because I want to be careful about saying Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
I'm even careful about saying conservative and liberals, because they're just, everyone's like a different kind of person. But my main point is saying that there's not much that is different in our values, but it's how fast we want those values to be shown in society. So like I'm personally of the opinion that I think trans people should be in the military. I don't think there should be any bar on that. As long as they can meet the physical requirements, go for it. If you don't like that, sorry. Military is about being a team, dealing with people that you don't like. That's how things go. His opinion, and this is not a bad opinion at all. Like let him think his own thing. You can have a different opinion, but he thinks that that we shouldn't have that change come too fast. He's also of the opinion that they should be in the military, but he just doesn't think that just telling someone like, hey, this is the rule now, is actually going to work. I think it will. I've been in certain structures of the military in my lifetime, and I think that's reasonable to say. But again, like everyone's understanding of the world is totally different, and he might be right. And
the military is just such a very different atmosphere than the rest of society. You in the military, you can say this is the new way it is now, and everybody below you has to go, yes sir.
You respect the office, not the actual person. Mm-hmm.
And I think historically we run into a lot of trouble when political leaders try to treat the entire society the way they treat the military. There's a long history in, particularly in progressive political philosophy, of the moral equivalent of war. Everything, from Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty, on through I think it's I'm not remembering the exact details, but President Obama at one point was, essentially invoked the military as an example of unity and working together, and sort of wanted to put use that as the example for getting the economy back working or whatnot, and trying to treat all of society the way that the military works is I think always gives me a little bit of pause, but but the flip side of that, of course, is that the military can be, in its own way, a vehicle for some of that change. World War II with integrated regiments, for example, was
True.
helped.
Tuskegee Airmen.
Yeah.
Like overperforming, actually.
Yeah, and not just the Tuskegee Airmen as a separate regiment, but having whites and blacks fighting alongside each other in the same foxholes kind of helped to break some of those barriers down.
I recently saw a YouTube video, actually this morning, right after I woke up. I should really stop doing that, but I saw a YouTube video this morning, and it was about this woman who wrote a book because her mother actually was of African descent, but she could pass as white. And she would stay out of the sun. She would always wear gloves. She would go to sleep with like a light foundation on, and because her husband was actually racist, and he never ever found out. He was like in the military, and he never ever found out that she was of African descent. And so this lady who was her daughter, wrote a book, and she looks totally white, but I think the book's called White Like Me. I want to say, or White Like Her, and I think that's really interesting because he still loved her, even though that he was racist, and so it shows you how like dumb that kind of thing is.
Yeah.
So Tuskegee Airmen, just like, oh wait, these people can still fly planes like regular everyone else, and so actually, like I think statistically they had a higher kill ratio than the average fighter pilot out of a P-39 Air Cobra. But yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I guess they should be able to fly with us. Get clubs out of the way, get clicks out of the way.
Yeah.
I've heard Congress is called something like high school. It's similar to high school, and you've been in a bureaucratic system. Do you agree with that? That was actually Tulsi Gabbard that I'm taking that from.
Yep. So I also did an internship on Capitol Hill a while back as well, so I have a little bit of firsthand experience with Congress. Yeah, very much so.
Very high school.
Very high school. The fun thing that a lot of people don't realize about Congress is that the people making most of the decisions are like 24, 25.
Really?
Yeah. Because
what do you mean?
So members of Congress are extremely overworked and have very small staffs relative to what they're trying to do. And so there's also, because Congress is a terrible place to work with long hours and basically no pay, a lot of people either burn out or they are there for a few years and then they go take a much more comfortable lobbying job.
What's the pay? Do you know? I mean, apart from the political lobbyers.
Higher up, I'm not super sure, but the entry level staff assistant is you're making you're lucky if you're making $30K a year, and that's
really?
And that's in DC, which has a very high cost of living. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But yeah, the combination of the low pay and all the turnover means that a lot of legislative aides and the people who are doing most of the who are learning most of the things are very young. Yeah. And that there are a bunch of problems that come with that. The members have to do a lot of their own fundraising, which kind of doesn't really help with that. They spend a lot of their time on fundraising and then traveling back and forth to their districts. But the biggest challenge that presents is that a lot of the expertise around things lives in the agencies and in the executive branch, in the bureaucracy, which is great for if you're an NSA and you have you can just kind of put out a fact sheet. It's like, here we asked our
what's NNSA?
National Nuclear Security Administration. Okay. You can say, hey, we got this fact sheet from Los Alamos on our latest project, and here it is, and the 25-year-old aide who's like trying to track nuclear issues and also like healthcare policy and also every single aspect of foreign policy and defense is like, oh, okay, great, cool. You just don't, when you're a legislative staffer, you just don't have the bandwidth to
kind of absorb all that, right?
Yeah, you can't absorb all that. You also can't independently kind of check these things.
Sure.
So the decay of Congress as an institution is sort of a hobby horse of mine. But
Sure.
a lot of
What is a hobby horse mean, actually?
just a pet issue that I will talk people's ear off about.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Well, that's actually interesting because I remember there's a clip that I feel like everyone's seen, but Bernie Sanders bringing up this gigantic stack of papers. I don't know if it was the Senate or what's going on, but it was a point of government at a very high level, and he brought up this gigantic stack of papers. It was like, hey, so this is the entire bill. None of us should be voting on this because no one has read all of this. This is like 3,000 pages.
Yep.
And so like that's what started me on like the wait. No one knows what they're doing at all. And so my buddy, that night that I actually saw that clip for the first time, I called up my buddy Christian T from back where I live at home. I was back at home at the time. And I was like, hey, man, you want to get Chick-fil-A and talk in my car for a while? I got some stuff to say. Because he's a major in economics, and he has some understanding of how like the political world works when it comes to economics. And so I was like, let's have a chat. And so we just talked for a long time about like all the ways that we might be able to fix the really bad situation we're in, where large companies can lobby like I guess political representatives. Like for example, it's taken a super long time for weed to be legalized, even though it has very, very few negative like medical side effects as compared to all these pharmaceutical drugs that America is pumping into themselves. Frankly, it's still really, really hard to get past because these pharmaceutical companies are frequently lobbying these, I guess, I don't want to say political people and sound dumb, but I guess if that's the word that my brain wants to use, I'm going to use it. Political people. And so, and like the reason it took until 2018 for hemp, a non-psychoactive version of weed, which it can be used for clothing, for building, for certain car parts, for insulation, for all these different things, that was only made legal in 2018 because a very prominent wood businessman lobbied to the government, saying like, "Hey, this is crazy Mexican weed. It's gonna it's gonna ruin everything." But in reality, he would just make less money because it's just a better material than wood. Like that's just the truth. So
yeah.
So how do we fix these huge glaring issues? Do you think?
That's hard because.
Or what's the start of it?
Because give Congress more money is quite possibly the least popular thing that anybody could possibly propose. But I think that, that's part of Congress needs to be able to hire bigger staffs, pay their staffs better to kind of stop the turnover.
Sure.
I'm a fan too of just expanding the size of especially the House of Representatives. How
many people are in it now?
There are 435.
435. So what do you think it should be? Just to understand how extreme you want to, or the change you want to make.
Each district right now is about, and this will probably change because of the new census, but as of last 10 years, it was about 700,000 citizens per member. When the country was founded, it was 30,000. I don't think we need to go quite that small, but I don't know. I don't think 3,000 members of Congress is entirely unreasonable.
Yeah, I think the word representative also doesn't really work that well because I don't feel represented by whoever the heck my representative is.
Yeah, it struggles a little bit with that, and so if that also conveniently, if you think the Electoral College is unrepresentative, if the Electoral College is just number of House members plus number of senators, that kind of shifts the balance a little more towards the more populous states in that way as well.
The only thing that I've heard against like there not being an electoral college, for example, is it would give the cities a lot more political power. And so that's the whole situation.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I'm
aware of that.
Definitely aware of that, and I think a lot of the complaint, a lot of but X person won the popular vote. And it's like, yeah, that's great. So the
Oh no, 45% of the people didn't get their say.
But I mean the analogy, and I'm making this up. This is probably not what actually happened, but like
you're not going to straw man too hard.
I think this is right. The 2019 World Series. Oh, the Astros scored more runs over the course of the series than the Nationals did, but the Nationals won the series. It's like, yeah, that's a cool little factoid, but that's not the game we're playing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So
one thing that my friend and I brought up was Senate, not just not there not being any term limits on Senate. Yeah, so that's something that I actually didn't know about that until like my buddy Christian was like, oh yeah, also one thing we could do is let like senators not be like kings, and and I was like, oh wait, they can just be in there forever, and he's like, yeah, they can just kind of chill there forever. Mitch McConnell's like 8,000 years old. Yeah,
I mean, there were some both House members and senators who are in the past have stayed in office into very noticeable cognitive decline.
Yeah.
There is a downside with term limits though, and while I was in grad school in Denver, I worked at the state legislature there, and they have term limits. It's 8 years in the state house and then 8 years in the state senate, so 16 years total. So the most senior member, the member who'd been there the longest by the time when I was working there was 2017. Had been elected in like 2002. So a lot of the, and this kind of gets back to the problem of institutional knowledge because the overwhelming majority of members had been there much shorter a time than that. So most of the institutional memory of, okay, this is how we did things, in the the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, that knowledge was held by the lobbying corps. So term limits have the potential to sort of undercut the institution in that way as well. I think the obvious answer would be an age limit, like like nobody over 75 or 80.
Yeah, it's so weird. We have a minimum age limit, but not a maximum.
But that that is problematic for any number of discrimination law reasons, and the AARP would never let us hear the end of that.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's not exactly a workable solution either. That's kind of the problem with all of this. It's like there are a lot of problems, but there are never a lot of solutions.
Yeah, maybe I think it was part of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, but like you can't discriminate on age. I feel like you should be able to discriminate on age. Is that too crazy to say? Like if someone's 93 years old and running, like, okay, let's say, how old is Joe Biden? Like 78?
Yeah, 78.
78. Okay, so he's allowed to have like 8 more years of being a president, and so I think he is. Yeah.
If he wins re-election.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, did he ever run before?
He ran, but he did not. He never won.
Gotcha. Well, so he's 8 years. So that's like mid-80s, pretty much. And to be honest, like, I don't know how fast someone in their mid-80s, like most people in their mid-80s can't drive. Should you be able to manage a world economy?
Yeah. And I don't know that. I don't know that completely getting rid of age discrimination laws is the answer, but I think there is a legitimate public good exception you could argue for elected officials.
Yeah, it's interesting though that we're thinking about age, like the maximum thing. I feel like when these rules were put in, it's similar to like, oh, you can only bring someone into court if it's more than $20, and that hasn't changed at all. It's like people probably weren't living past like 50 in reality.
Yeah. People were living 60s and 70s. The like average age statistic is always kind of skewed because so many people died very, very young.
Yeah. But yeah, then again, a 50-year-old man is younger in today's age. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And exactly. And the physical demands of the job have also changed.
They've increased, right?
Yeah, they've increased. Well, I would say they've gone down because if you're a member of Congress in the like early republic, and you're from like Georgia, you have to, either ride a horse or take a carriage, and neither of those is exactly comfortable.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So it's just the physical demands of that travel make it more difficult for made it back then more difficult for older people to do the job. Whereas getting on an airplane is a little bit easier.
Something that has increased as like the physicality of the job has gone down is like the social, maybe like difficulties that might be presented because everyone that you're used to interacting with is dead.
Yeah,
and while like life might be a little more comfortable, you have the scrutiny of millions and millions of people that are all able to comment on your actions.
Yeah.
So. I don't have, as I said earlier, like I don't have any social media following. I don't have any social media in general, so I don't have to worry about any comments. But like if I actually wanted to make this radio show something, like if I were to be part of a radio station, I probably want to make social media again.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you want to be in media, that's kind of what you need to do. There has to be some way to contact you apart from email.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I won't be able to read comments. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's very tempting.
Yeah, I bet. Are you into social media?
Not really. I'm just kind of a lurker, keeping up with friends from high school and college, and that kind of, occasionally I'll throw up a, if I'm especially proud of something I cooked, I will stoop to that level
now,
every once in a while. But
how often do you cook? How long have you been doing
that? I cook pretty frequently. It's not that often that anything I do will be worthy of like going up on social media, but I've in the last couple of years I've really enjoyed getting into just trying new recipes, trying new techniques and
sure.
that kind of thing. I did the last one that went up was a few weeks back. I did some like bacon wrapped guacamole stuffed chicken breasts that were just
nice.
Phenomenal.
That's awesome. I love bacon wrapped chicken. I eat that a lot when I come back home. It's sort of like the first meal that I get. So we have pretty much a minute, 10 seconds. Anything else that you want to say?
No, that's
any shout outs to the world.
Shout out to the world. You're great. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, sure. I've really appreciated talking to you and getting your opinion on things because you're from I guess a very different section of life than I'm used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. Good talking to you.
Likewise.
I like your ring, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It was my grandfather's.
Oh yeah, I was about to ask.
Yeah,
up and down.
Yeah, grew up. It's turquoise for those of you who may not be able to see
yeah.
it. But my grandfather lived most of his life out in the high deserts of Eastern California.
Okay.
So a lot of kind of similar cultural things to what you might find in like Arizona and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I can see that aesthetic then. All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for talking. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You can find this episode on YouTube under Christian Blaney's Cockpit. And it's by the way, I'm going to remove it from Apple Podcast and Budsprout. The only reason is because until I start making ad revenue, it doesn't make sense because I have to pay for that kind of thing. So it's just going to be on YouTube, which is fine. Totally good for me. This is mostly practice. Everyone have a nice day and be good to at least one other person you see. Bye-bye.